Thank you for a very, very provocative talk, both of you, and they really feed into each other. I want to take you both into my world a little bit, an example that I think is universal. In medicine, we have this phenomenon where we've had tremendous technological improvements. I say improvements, quote unquote, because they came with a price. The electronic medical record was introduced, and the average physician now spends, for every 1 hour cumulatively with patients, we spend 2 hours on the electronic medical record.
Ouch.
And another hour, subsequently at home catching up on your inbox. There's so much dissatisfaction within medicine. Patients also have tremendous complaints. They say we're not able to have a conversation with the physician. There's always a computer intruding. There's a screen. So I think it comes back to this tension where, yes, the power has gone down to the younger generation, but the consumers remain largely elders, and more so with every passing year, the aging of this population. So how do we deal with this tension, in your hospitality industry, looking at the future, the tension between technological advancement seeming to promise that it'll come with all these gains when people don't fundamentally change in the sense that we still need to be nourished, we still need to be loved, we need to be mentored, we need to be cared for. And how do you do that?
Great. The guy with the operational experience, it tells me.
Well, you want me to go first? I'll go first. Okay. I mean, I think some of it's the adaptation process. Whenever you're trying something new, you're not going to be very good at it. I'm surfing. I'm almost 57, and I'm learning how to surf. I'm not very good at it. If you can be patient enough to actually realize that there's a lot of learning curve available to you in the first shorter period of time, that level of patience can pay off. The problem is we sort of live in a world where there's not a lot of patience, and people start being hard on themselves. And so, I mean, I guess I would just say, in terms of the example you used, my guess is that over time with medical electronic records, there will be adaptations and improvements that will actually make it more efficient. That would be my expectation. But if there's not, then at some point it will be an idea that time has not come and has to go away. Because if it actually becomes too cumbersome, then I don't think it actually should stick around.
And that might have been an unfair example, because the electronic medical record in its present iteration isn't really designed for the patient or the physician's comfort. It's really designed for billing, and that's why it's so cumbersome. And but that's another story. We won't go there. But
well, I would add the problem these days is that the market for the professional software is so small that there's no way to afford a decent design. So a lot of time we blame ourselves when we can't use this system, but in fact it's just bad design. And video games are better designed than EMR systems because there are a lot more people using video games than EMR systems. And as a patient, I've noticed that. And I think the most terrifying thing is our human adaptability. So Doug Engelbart, who was here at Stanford, invented the first mouse. And part of the experimentation of finding an interaction device is they were trying all sorts of different things. And and they would come up with a new device, and they'd put it out in the lab, and people could walk past and use it. And one of them was a pointing device that was basically a polar axis. So it had a vertical axle and then a shaft that would go in and out, and then the stylus at the end. So you would look at the computer screen and draw a straight line, but with this. But of course, what he said to the person who put it out, I said, remember, do the polar to XY coordinate conversion on it before you put it out, because if you don't, then when somebody draws a straight line, it'll come across as a parabola. He puts it out, forgot to do the conversion, and people were testing it for a week, and Doug happened to walk past, and the person was looking at the screen, drawing a perfectly straight line by unwittingly drawing a perfect parabola. And that's the problem with most of the software for professionals these days, is it's so badly designed, they're making you draw a parabola to get a straight line.
So we actually have a little time for questions that I want to not hog the time and turn it to our audience. So I'm waiting for my signal from the microphone. There's a hand up here in front, if you can get a mic up here.
Sorry for making you walk so far. My name is Ian O'Connell. I'm from AARP. So I live in Washington, D.C., so I'm really good at stealing other people's ideas. So Tyler Cohen has written a lot about algorithms and how much algorithms are governing our life. Pandora tells us what music to like. Match.com tells us who to date and who to marry. And so I'm wondering, particularly with Airbnb, but with other things, we're starting to learn about the inherent bias within these algorithms. And the people that create these algorithms have biases unknowing to them, and then that creates challenges, particularly for elders, in how these algorithms are making determinations about, who to like on Facebook or what program to, or what software to buy. And one of the new things last week that came out was they're having an app that takes a picture and it determines whether you're a good fit for a company in a job interview. So they don't even have to talk to you. So I'm just wondering about how that machine learning has an impact.
So is you're a good fit just based upon your picture?
That's right.
Well, that's pretty bad, actually. There's a lot of bias that could be there. I think the idea of the world moving in a personalized direction, it goes both ways. The more you use the product, I love it on one hand. The more you use a company or service, the better they get to know you, the better they can deliver on what your interests are. But then there's a fundamental flaw in the premise as well, is that the reason you're buying something might change for a particular purpose, such that you're suggesting things to me that have nothing to do with this particular use that you're going to have. So I think that's one of the risks with it. I mean, we are not very far along on the path toward personalization at Airbnb. And we're doing everything we can, based upon hiring Eric Holder last year to make sure that we actually do everything we can from a bias and discrimination basis to actually look at what are the things we need to do over time to actually reduce the potential for bias on the platform. I don't think there's been any evidence of any bias based upon what we've done engineering-wise. What is clear is that there, in certain cases, have been bias in terms of what hosts or guests will do when they see the picture of another person or see their name in terms of whether they actually would want them in their home. But we've made actually some pretty good progress on that, and we have watchdogs watching us to just tell us, how we can make more progress.
So let me offer some practical advice. I've had an email address on my business card since 1982. The IRS allowed my identity to be stolen out of the IRS system. I've been living in the digital world forever. Who here actually puts down their real birthday when you're asked for that online? Good. Lie through your teeth all the time on the web. Put up digital chaff. So what I will do, like, for example, so who here gets annoyed when you have an ad served to you that is not relevant to you? Okay, you got to get over that. When I get an ad that has no relevance to me, I go, yes, yes. And I spend time, when I'm waiting for a conference call to start, I will do searches on Google for things that I have absolutely no interest in. Pinterest is convinced that I'm a 17-year-old cheerleader. And I love that. The way to overcome the algorithms is to do what we've always done. On the savannah, when our ancestors learned to avoid getting eaten by leopards, is be sneaky and be crafty and throw up lots of distractions and never use your birthday and don't use your real name.
Got it.
Question from over there. Who has the mic? Yes.
Hi. In different cultures, the role of elders is often defined or associated with gender. And I'm curious to know what your experience has been in the tech world and whether you alluded to problems at Uber and problems of that nature, whether you think that the role of the wise elder might be gendered in some way in your perfect world.
Yeah, of course, in my perfect world, the elder in the modern elder role in an organization would be gender neutral. And I think, but I don't think the question in the tech world is not about elders and gender. It's about engineers and gender more than anything. because that's the place where and I'm talking more broadly, the whole industry. I think Airbnb has been very much on the leading edge of hiring underrepresented populations in the engineering core. But the truth is that it's been a very uncomfortable place to be a woman within an engineering core in a tech company quite often. I think that's improving, and the good news is there's a lot of support groups that are gathering various underrepresented groups so that you can feel like you actually know which employers are the bad employers, and therefore those employers actually don't get, not only do they not get as many women applying, but they also don't get a lot of men applying because there's a lot of men who say, I don't want to be in a bro culture. And I can tell you, with Uber having its meltdown, and Uber's culture is probably not as bad as you see in the paper, but it's had an enormous effect on their recruiting, to the detriment. We know it because we're sort of one of their big competitors for recruiting technical staff. So that's a good news. I believe in karmic capitalism. What goes around comes around. It sometimes just takes too long for it to come around, but yes, it happens.
So we have time for one last question over there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Camille Kennedy with Avenidas. Chip, I really appreciate your talking about being an elder, and also I love the sort of analogy or metaphor about the library. Brian reached out to you because of your internal library and your life experiences, not because you had tech experience. In fact, because you didn't have tech, I would posit to say that it made it even more attractive for what you brought into sort of his global world of being able to function as a 26-year-old CEO, working with a lot of different types of people. My question for you is, when you look at sort of this gap year, that you're talking about, and when you look at women who historically take a sort of an anticipated, I wouldn't call it that, gap year when they step off the train to raise children.
A pause.
A pause.
Right.
And then they come back, oftentimes, myself included, you come back having sort of re-identified how you want to be professionally if you're not a doctor or a lawyer or something like that.
Yeah.
What is is there a way, do you think, for more people as we live longer and decide to become raw again, to get cooked again, that there are many more opportunities to fully reinvent what you bring to the table?
I think this is going to probably be sociologically one of the more interesting elements of the next 20 years, is that there's a group of Stanford-related women who created something called Reboot Excel, which is, they've had almost 1,000 women in about 7 different markets in the US now that have gone through it, and it's all women who took the pause. Not only because of children, but for other reasons as well. So it's a whole program to help someone who's been out of the workplace, but 2/3 of their graduates are people who had graduate degrees, so they're people who actually have a lot of experience, to actually figure out how do you get back into the workplace, both including learning technical skills like how to create a LinkedIn profile if you haven't been in the market for 10 years, to understanding how to use Slack. That's that, but it's also they're helping people to see what are the options of the paths I could go on. And that's one of the things I'm working on with the Gap Year Academy, the Modern Elder Gap Year Academy. We're working with a company called SY Partners, who's actually worked with AARP, and they've worked with a lot of other companies. They're sort of famous group of people who came out of Apple 20 years ago, to actually create a mastery map. How do you create a mastery map that allows a person to understand what are the skills that you have developed over time that actually are transferable to a new sector or a new costume you're wearing? Because the truth is, I ended up having areas of mastery that I would never have said to Brian when he was asking me to join, that these are part of my mastery. I didn't understand that they were areas that, frankly, relative to the people I was hanging out with, who are half my age, I did have mastery in these areas. I was judging myself harshly relative to people who are my age in terms of those areas of mastery. So long story short is, I think the idea that we have, over time, we accumulate a set of skills that aren't all like a carton of milk that expire based upon skills extinction, which is a term that didn't used to exist, but is existing more and more these days. I think there are transferable skills that you've learned along the way that you just have to understand what they are and then look at how do you apply them in a new habitat.
I want to thank our two wonderful speakers, and we now have an opportunity to break. Thank you.